The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, May 2nd, 2025. I'm back from spring break. We'll all learn, if I remember how to do this job, in very short order. Joining me to fumble through the fun this morning, reporter emeritus Paul Tudhill, former state senator Eric Lesser, now senior counsel at WilmerHale, and NEPM news reporter Nirvana Williams. Good morning to each of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's been a week.
It sure has. And if you want to join the discussion, our email, therundown@nepm.org. Coming up, our Rundowner's thoughts on a new report delves into Latino residents' contributions to state economic growth this past decade. Holyoke Public Schools will revert from state to local control in July, but the local teachers union isn't pleased with parts of that process, and how, in the face of climate and political turmoil, Mass Audubon is calling for continued conservation efforts. First, though, as Eric Lesser just alluded to, it has been a week, and included in that week was President Donald Trump's marking of his first 100 days in office. And part of the reason I love this job so much is I get to ask questions like, why the heck do we do this? Why is this something we mark as a country? And I took a quick look, and Brookings did this piece a couple of years ago where they talked about how the 100 days was popularized under President Franklin Roosevelt's tenure not because he rolled back prohibition and brought out the booze and everyone was feeling pretty good. No. It was, in fact, quote, because of his breathtaking scope of bold and new actions, both legislative and regulatory. Eric Lesser, I'm going to turn to you. You've been inside of the White House back when President Obama was in office, so you had two cracks at the 100 days, and you've now been in it and watched it from afar. What are your thoughts?
Well, boy, you probably would have to go back to FDR to find a period of 100 days of a new president that's been as expansive in its scope and as far-reaching in its impact. Quite literally turning huge portions of the global economy upside down in the matter of a few months. And you're right, Carrie, it's a totally artificial deadline. It means nothing. It was popularized by historians that analyzed FDR's response to the New Deal and the stock market crash of 1929. So, I think you would need to go back that far in time to find comparable impacts.
He took America off the gold standard. As I said, he rolled back that piece of prohibition, but declared a bank holiday, which stopped the run on the banks. But David Axelrod, who you know from your tenure in the Obama White House, said that of the first 100 days, quote, it's a hallmark holiday, lots of attention, but really no significance. Paul Tudhill, you've watched 100 days or two come or go. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, a couple of things that I find interesting is, for one thing, rather than try to take advantage of the Republican trifecta, control of the White House, the House, and the Senate, and craft a legislative agenda for the first 100 days, Trump chose to go it by himself. I alone can do this, as we remember him famously saying, or I alone can fix this, as I believe was the exact quote that he gave at the Republican convention back in 2016 when he ran the first time. The risk involved, obviously, in doing this all by executive order is that the executive orders can be stopped or rolled back by the courts, which we've seen happen in the first 100 days. They can be subsequently changed by later administrations. So, in a lot of sense, both the short-term and the long-term effects of what he's done are yet to be seen, but certainly he's done a lot, and this bull in the china shop approach that he's taken is something that his base responds to very favorably. They love what he's done in the first 100 days,
Absolutely.
according to all of the reporting. General public, not so much. We've seen his approval ratings fall even further from their already historic lows.
Yeah, it was interesting. I took a look at some of the Pew Research numbers, and to your point, Paul, the partisan divide is so deep right now. 7 in 10 Republicans or Republican-leaning independents approve of Trump's job performance, the administration's cuts to government, increased tariffs, ending diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in the federal government. And then that's compared to an even wider majority of Democrats and Democratic leaners. They disapprove of that job performance, the cuts, the tariffs, the DEI policy changes. So clearly, we're seeing these deep divides. And, specifically to the 413, we have talked here on the program about a number of programs and policies that are impacting people in Western Massachusetts. Among those, cuts to veteran services, impacts to programs that Springfield and Holyoke had already in large part rolled out, improvements to HVAC systems and other sort of really nitty-gritty things that we maybe wouldn't talk about typically in a news cycle. But those funding, we've seen that money threatened to be clawed back. And when you talk with leaders, specifically on those two instances in Springfield and Holyoke, there's a lot of confusion for them. In the instance of Springfield, they've got most of the projects finished. It's just small things that haven't been buttoned up. So now how do you fill that gap? Nirvani, what are you thinking as you've been watching these first 100 days?
I think it's really interesting that you bring up Roosevelt, because I just with the impact that he made back then, with so many things that were happening, I do feel like as a reporter with reporting on the Trump administration, it's just been like organized chaos and a lot of things kind of being shoved at the public's face and my face too, to try to unpack and explain to people, especially with judges pushing back on a lot of the executive orders that he's tried to pass. And to your point, just on what's happening on a local level with a lot of federal cuts happening, speaking to a lot of nonprofit leaders and people in different philanthropic organizations, people who rely on that grant money, they're saying that the state is trying to supplement those federal cuts and that federal funding, but that the state funding could never really supplement the amount of federal cuts that or federal money that they would have gotten. And Eric, I really wanted to talk to you about this. I just wonder on a larger scale how the state, and Healy in particular, is handling that. Because I'm just kind of like, well, how involved is the state now in providing some sort of resources or funding for these nonprofits, specifically in immigration.
And just for clarity, not currently a sitting state senator, but
right,
plenty of experience in that area.
Yeah, totally.
So Massachusetts is in a strong financial and fiscal position relative to a lot of other states. We have a large rainy day fund. We still do have a strong and growing economy. Tax receipts are up. They're actually in the middle of their budget debate on Beacon Hill right now. But as the governor has said, as the Speaker of the House has said, to be completely clear, even a healthy state like Massachusetts with a strong fiscal balance sheet cannot fill the gaps of federal funding. Just to give an example, the Medicaid program, which is partly funded by state taxpayers, partly funded by the federal government, even small tweaks to that program in terms of how the federal reimbursements work are billions of dollars, and it can't be backfilled by states. Unlike the feds, state government cannot run deficits, so we need to balance our budget at the State House every single year, and the governor has said that. So people need to understand that cuts to these federal programs, there will be nips and tucks here and there that the state can supplement or support, but there should not and there cannot be a full-scale replacement of these programs on a state level. They just structurally can't do it.
And also the states, it's very hard for states to go it alone, basically, right. and the climate goals are another area that will be severely impacted by what the Trump administration is doing. Going back to incentivizing fossil fuels at the federal level, doing away with wind power and other sources of clean energy, taking away federal money to put in charging facilities across the state. All of this is stuff, again, I know the activists have been clamoring for Massachusetts to stand up on the climate issues, but it's just unrealistic that the state can go it alone on something like that.
And there was a recent executive order that the Trump administration put out specifically targeting state-level emissions benchmark laws, state-level emissions laws like the one we have in Massachusetts. So there is a big question mark here about what the ramifications of that are going to be, and leaders need to be grappling with this, and it's an immense amount of uncertainty for state-level leaders as well as obviously the feds about how you're going to navigate this and what you're putting at risk, right, by not taking these orders and taking these new mandates seriously.
Well, certainly something we'll continue to discuss and unpack here on the Rundown. I'm going to move us on to reporting about from the State House News and GBH News this week. Report cites, quote, untapped potential of growing Hispanic Latino population. Contributions to the state's economic growth outpace share of the population. And just a few statistics here, so for a framework for this discussion. Between 2014 and 2023, the Hispanic and Latino people accounted for 84% of the state's population growth. 84%. And this is a state that is heavily concerned with population growth. We saw the loss of a congressional seat because of this within this past, just shy of this past decade. Hispanics and Latinos accounted for 6 in 10 new jobs. Hispanic and Latinos contributed more than 1/4 of growth in the gross state product over a 10-year period, and that's while being 13.5% of the population. I want to have one quote here from the Mass Taxpayer Foundation policy researcher Pablo Suarez, who said, "This report reveals a critical truth. Hispanic Latino residents are essential drivers of economic growth in Massachusetts and shows how much untapped potential remains." Nirvani, what did you think when you saw the findings in this report?
I was doing some research on it, and apparently last year the state experienced its largest population increase in more than half of a century, with the jump that has been largely attributed to immigration, which I think is a really big thing to be discussing, especially in Trump's 100 days as well. And that's according to the Boston Globe. It was estimated that 90,000 immigrants came to Massachusetts between 2023 and 2024, also according to the UMass Donahue Institute. And I think that that's really fascinating. And one note of interest in this report that grabbed me is that there's a significant gap still exists with Hispanic and Latino residents graduating college and owning homes at lower rates than other demographic groups. So I just think that, and there's an $11.1 billion wage gap between Hispanics and Latinos in Massachusetts and the overall state population.
And I think that gets to just one second, Paul. It gets to that point that Pablo Suarez was making about the untapped potential.
Yes.
Thinking about closing these gaps in education, in workforce training, and wealth. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was just going to say the report points out that the top jobs filled by Hispanics are in education, healthcare, and social services. So, I think that tells you that there is, and this report says that there is a huge wage gap between Latinos and the population as a whole.
Because those jobs tend to be on the lower side of the pay scale.
As opposed to tech jobs, financial services, and some of the other areas that we have high employment rates of in Massachusetts. I think from if the purpose of this report is to provide data to inform public policy decision making, then I think the real change for Latinos in Massachusetts has to come through political gains. They need to elect more people to public office in Massachusetts in order to advance policies that will help Latinos economically.
For you, Eric Lesser, is this about state intervention from a legislative perspective, or what are your thoughts?
Well, first, just want to give a shout out to ALX and Inaida Roman and the great team there. They did a great job with this report. Full disclosure, they're a client of mine, although I did not work on this report. But I've been a big fan of the organization for a long time. I think that there's 2 takeaways I had. First, just an immense amount of entrepreneurship, an immense amount of creativity coming out of this community. And it is a very diverse community. There's a lot of different types of Spanish-speaking people, obviously a lot of different types of people that make up the Hispanic community, and we should recognize and acknowledge that. It's not a monolithic. It's
Absolutely,
not one big
Right.
group. And the second part, I think, is the state needs to do its part to create and enhance competitiveness, right? Bring down the cost of housing, improve access and mobility into small business ownership and home ownership, work on those transportation linkages. The same things that help every other community in our state is certainly going to help our very fast-growing Latino community, and we should brag about this. This is a huge asset we've got in Massachusetts, and the sky is the limit. The community is growing. There's a lot of new businesses getting created. There's a lot of new dynamic energy, and I think it's really something to celebrate.
Well, we are going to take a break here on the Rundown. When we come back, concerns over oversight as the Holyoke School District prepares to revert back to local control. One group's efforts to keep climate improvement efforts top of mind as federal support for such effort wanes, and scoop sprays and prediction from our Rundowners. I'm Carrie Saldo. You're listening to The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back. You're listening to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo, joined by Eric Lesser, now Senior Counsel at WilmerHale, NEPM News reporter Nirvani Williams, and reporter Emeritus Paul Tuthill.
Just say I'm retired.
I love emeritus.
That's a certain gravitas, Paul.
Yeah.
Like of steam, but I appreciate that. We're going to talk this morning now about April May Munford's reporting in the Springfield Republican newspaper. The headline, Holyoke schools return to local control imperiled by same old receivership with new name, teachers union say. So that story dropped on Tuesday, followed by the release of the state's sort of next steps in this process. We've been talking for some months now here on the program about Holyoke, which has been the school district has been under state control for about a decade. And the school committee and members of Holyoke said mid last year, it's time for us to take this control back. State receivership has not helped improve our test scores, which is the reason that the state stepped in to begin with, and it's now time for us to control this. Now, this, as we saw in a letter this week from state education leaders, they're sort of mapping out how they think they should do that. Mayor of Holyoke, Joshua Garcia, signed off on this deal, much to the chagrin of local teachers unions who feel like it's stripping their ability to collectively bargain. Now, this next steps of the process will last about 2 years, and they are not pleased about that. They held a walk-in on Thursday morning, essentially a preschool a protest ahead of school to say these are challenges and issues that we're having with this process. The mayor has defended it, saying, look, we can't have sink or swim here. We need to have some sort of guardrails in place as we transition back to this process. Paul, do you regard this as we're sort of seeing the inner machinations of a very complicated process made very public now? Or what are your thoughts on it in general?
Well, only 3 school districts in Massachusetts have been put into receivership, and Holyoke is the first to have an exit plan. Lawrence has actually been in receivership for far longer than Holyoke. I think Lawrence is approaching almost 15 years in receivership.
And it hasn't seen great results either.
No, that's true. But I guess my point is that we're kind of in uncharted waters here because Holyoke is the first to go through this exit plan. As you noted, the mayor says it would be wrong for the state to just walk away and say, okay, Holyoke, you're on your own, sink or swim. The teachers union, certainly, I think their expectation was that once receivership ended, we would go back to a situation where there would be full collective bargaining. Now the state says, no, we're going to dictate how long your school year is going to be, how long your school day is going to be, things that would normally be taken up as issues of collective bargaining.
Well, and specifically, I think the state is saying the superintendent in Holyoke is now going to dictate those things. It's shifting from the state to the superintendent, which was also something that the school teachers found issue with, saying
receivership, superintendent, potato.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the president of the teachers union, Nick Cream, said that there's a longer term impact here without bargaining rights. He's saying that the district will continue to see educators work in Holyoke for a couple of years and then move on. As you're watching this, Eric Lesser, what's your sense?
Well, first, I do think the crux of the issue here is the collective bargaining rights, and that's obviously really what this is about. But I want to amplify what Mayor Garcia said and pointed out, which is this was a 10-year essentially takeover by Boston of the Holyoke school systems, and I don't think we would want a situation where the state then throws the keys back into the street and says, you're on your own. I think we've got to give some time and space for the transition. They announced 2 years. The teachers do have a point, which is, a lot of the gains and a lot of the sustained progress is going to be because of the teachers and because of the work and the effort of the teachers. So my hope is that the next 2 years can be used to, for lack of a better way of putting it, take the training wheels off and get everybody back into a place where they can go, fully independent, because the worst case scenario is the handoff not going well, to Paul's point, and the state having to go right back in. And if the state went back in, it would probably be even more extreme and draconian than the first time, because that's often how these things work. So I think we've got to give everybody the benefit of the doubt here, give everybody the chance to make this 2-year interim period work. The teachers have a point that it's maybe not perfect, but it's certainly better than an indefinite, prolonged, unknown, state takeover of Holyoke that could go on for a decade more. I think we want to avoid that. So, my sense is that the mayor is approaching this the right way, and let's see at the end of this 2-year period where everything stands.
So this is coming to bear July 1st. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was just going to say it's not exactly it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison, but it's somewhat apropos that when the Finance Control Board left Springfield in 2009, they just didn't pack up and leave. There were there were legal controls there were legal controls put in place in Springfield where the state is overseeing aspects of municipal finance in Springfield that they are not doing in any other municipality. For example, the chief finance officer in Springfield is essentially a state appointee. Yeah, the person is hired by the city through a normal vetting process, but the appointment has to be signed off on in Boston.
And I think to that point, that is an example, I think, of a successful transition,
right?
Because the Springfield city finances remain in a strong place. The bond rating is strong, and it might not have gone that way if the transition had not been done as smoothly as it did.
Well, I'm going to go ahead, Murtabani, very quickly.
Yes, I was just going to say that I think it's really interesting what was kept in place versus what wasn't from the state. And I think that just with the backdrop of the Trump administration as well, making so many cuts to education, it's a little scary just to see what the teacher retention rate could be in the next 2 years and what student performances could do with this transition. So I think that, while I agree, Eric, that the mayor, I think, is doing his best, I think that they should really try to be working together on this, especially with a lot of federal cuts to resources and public school systems now.
Yeah, you hope maybe that the federal environment encourages everybody to kind of come together and work on work in common purpose here, because you're exactly right. There's arguably some bigger forces at play, and we've got to be united to make sure we're doing the best for everyone's students.
Well, to be continued, as I say, this begins July 1st. It will certainly not be the end. Our next headline, in the face of climate and political turmoil, Mass Audubon doubles down on conservation efforts. This was reporting by Ella Adams of the State House News Service. Quote, New England's largest nature-based conservation organization is pressing forward to address the impending threats of climate change and biodiversity loss across Massachusetts, while maneuvering through a moment of federal hostility to conservation and clean energy efforts. It was interesting to read that Mass Audubon is 129 years old. And when I took a peek at their map and sort of what they steward here in Western Massachusetts, by my count, it's about 14 different locations. And these are places like Canoe Meadows out in Pittsfield, where you can just go and hike and enjoy the outdoors. And I think this stuck out to me because we celebrated Earth Day and Arbor Day both last week, and it was the 55th anniversary of Earth Day. And of course, I did what I do, and I started looking at why we started celebrating Earth Day, and it was under Richard Nixon, the Republican administration. And the public support and the grassroots pressure around the events leading up to Earth Day eventually led to the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency. So we're marking 55 years of Earth Day and 55 years of the EPA. And so some different thoughts now on how the environment is addressed. Paul, any thoughts as you read through this, the CEO, David O'Neill, giving his thoughts from Mass Audubon?
Well, good on Mass Audubon's work, particularly on nature-based climate action, as we talked about it earlier. In the face of the federal changes in their climate policies. The state also has had some setbacks in its efforts to reach its climate goals. There was a $500 million cut that was made to the Mass Save budget. And then just this week, the state announced that they were putting a hold on enforcing rules designed to sell more electric-powered trucks. So good for Mass Audubon for the work they're doing.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, Eric, was David O'Neill talked about this idea of redirecting some of the funds, the sales tax from sporting goods that goes into the general fund currently, and using that instead for land protection efforts. In your experience, though, being inside of the legislature and trying to take something that's going into the general fund and redirect that, is that like walking uphill backward without boots on to try and get something like this done?
I think as the saying goes, best of luck in your senior year. But I do give him a lot of credit, and shout out to Mass Audubon. I'm an alum of the Laughing Brook Day Camp in Hamden.
Wow.
The great organization. But I think one element that sometimes gets lost in the climate discussion is preservation of open space and conservation of lands. That in and of itself, providing safe, beautiful, protected places for people to bring their kids, for people to enjoy the outdoors, is really a very important part of promoting a climate-friendly set of policies. And I really give Mass Audubon a lot of credit. Not their first rodeo, right? They've been at this a long time.
129 years.
And they will continue to be at it. So I give them a lot of credit for standing up and not backing down.
Nirvani, weather's getting nicer. Are you going to hit a Mass Audubon property sometime soon?
Probably. And especially out in Western Mass, there's so many, like you were saying, open, like really important open spaces where nature should be protected, and people should be, they should be focusing on that, definitely.
All right, Rundowners, time for Scoops, Praise, and Prediction, where we ask our group here to make a prediction about the news. Give us a scoop on an upcoming story, specifically probably Nirvani might be working on, or heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget. Paul Tudhill, I'll start with you.
So totally out of left field, I'll make this
Nice.
prediction. I predict that the USFL, which is a spring professional football league that nominally competes with the National Football League, will ultimately fail. Last week, the NFL draft, this is the NFL draft where a bunch of maybe professional football players come out on stage, got 10 times the television viewership of an actual USFL game.
Totally.
I learned about an organization I know nothing about. Nirvani Williams.
I wanted to just praise and shout out NPR's religion team, Sarah Ventry, some other people too on the team. And especially as they're reporting through conclave following Pope Francis's death, I'm on NPR's religion team, so I'm really protective of them. And they're all in Vatican City right now, just kind of waiting. Conclave, also a good movie.
Yes, it was.
Eric Lesser, your thoughts?
I'll just give a shout out. The Community Music School in Springfield has their annual gala this Saturday. If people want to go, it's right downtown at the Community Music School this Saturday. Great organization. They run a preschool. They run music programs for thousands of Springfield Public School students. Just a great group, and excited to celebrate them on Saturday.
I also have praise this week. Allie, a small dog missing for weeks, was found by 2 West Springfield firefighters in a sewer drain off of I-91. Interestingly, I did not learn about this from my husband, a West Side firefighter. I read about it in the Boston Globe.
Oh.
Wow.
And so if you want the details, Claire Thornton has all of those on the Boston Globe website. It's a really heartwarming story. You're listening to The Rundown. My thanks to our panel. Go out there and have a great Friday.